Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast. Today we're coming at you from a room in an Airbnb somewhere in Georgia. I can't tell you where. But we got Mr. Shane Parker with us. Shane, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good. Jacob, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Doing real well. I've seen more deer so far today scouting than I saw in 5 days in Tennessee. So I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah,
doing pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exciting. So we're on our Georgia hunt. People have heard us talking a little bit about it, kind of leading up to this. And we all arrived. You guys arrived around lunchtime today and got to look around. Shane, you came up here and drove around just a little bit, right? Like a couple weeks back?
Yeah, I did. I come back up here, and I guess it was the end of June.
Okay.
Yes, it's been several months ago.
Yeah. And I came up here on Friday and looked around a little bit. Put a camera out, got a almost equal number of deer and people on it. But, hey, it's all part of the experience. So I guess we got a lot to talk about. Shane, I want to talk to you. I think we're going to talk about, like, thermal hubs and stuff. Jacob, what did you want to talk about?
Oh, we're going to that conversation. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I was thinking thermal hubs.
I didn't know where we were going with this, Shane. I'll be 100% honest.
So what I want to do, I want to do a little Shane, could you pull that mic just a little bit closer to your mouth?
There you go.
There we go. So with this, I wanted to do like a little pre-hunt talk here, and then towards the end of the week we can record like a post-hunt thing, and I guess that might be the Thursday episode. But I also want to talk about like thermal hubs and stuff like that, because like there's always plenty to talk about there. But as it stands today, like what we've looked at, kind of scouting around and everything, Shane, what has been your experience so far up here today? Like, planning the hunt and what you're going to do, and then you got up here today. And what'd you see, basically?
Well, I guess it kind of played out exactly how I thought it would in a lot of ways. I expected the area I scouted today was a thermal hub to start out, and it had some sign but not enough sign to make me, really excited about it, which is kind of what I thought I would see. And the ag at this time of year that's in this area is really what's holding the deer right now, and that's kind of what I expected, I guess. I kind of expected to have a little more hard mast hitting the ground that the deer were feeding on, and that's not at all the case, and that's really changing basically the movement that I expected. So it's all about hard mast right now, and there's not enough of that hitting the ground right now that they're seeking out to really change their movement pattern right now.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's kind of one thing that I was wondering about, because when I came up here on Friday, it's Wednesday right now, so it's less than a week later, but on Friday, getting around in the woods a little bit, I just didn't feel like I found like that defined feed sign in one spot, which I didn't get to look at a ton of stuff, but one thing that I did do is I got way up on one of the sides of these mountains over here, and it's pretty open, and you can hear for a long ways. It was a calm day. And I just kind of sat there for like 10 minutes and didn't move and just listened. And I couldn't hear anything dropping, really, outside of what squirrels were knocking out. So that was one thing where I'm like, okay, it seems like it's not really happening yet. Like, seems like everything's kind of holding on. And maybe we're not going to come up here and just find like a white oak just raining at this point. Yeah. But if you did find that, I'm assuming it'd be pretty good, Jacob, what about you? You came up here, and you and Seth ran around a little bit today, kind of looked around. What'd you find?
Yeah, we drove around a bunch of different spots and decided to go to a piece of a certain side of the management area, or this piece of public that I was really interested in checking out. And the reasoning why is it had, it seemed like a decent amount of steep elevation change. And that's something about, like, in the part of the state we're in, you have a lot of elevation change in general. Some of it's more gradual than others. But this one area had a couple big different drainages kind of running throughout it. So we decided to run up there, and I wanted to walk down one of these drainages. And not really – and kind of my thought process was we're going to kind of work the drainages down potentially, because when we were driving up, there's white oaks everywhere. Everywhere we drove, at least when you were down low, you had white oaks. And I was thinking, we could walk down, see if any of these trees are dropping first, and then also if we happen to bump something – they're more than likely going to be bedded above us, and I feel more comfortable bumping them up from the bottom than blowing them off the top from you coming off the top, especially like on an afternoon, kind of evening kind of walkabout. And we did that, and we found a there were a ton of sign. And when I say sign, just trails, some tracks, stuff like that, but nothing that really confirmed that, like, hey, there is definitely a buck using it. We had I had some thoughts going into this hunt thinking, hopefully, because at the time of this hunt, we're going to start having some of these more mature bucks starting to shed velvet. We're going to start finding some whip rubs, start finding some subtle rubs every now and then that kind of key in on what a buck's actually currently using. And we didn't find that this afternoon. We found some feed sign. We found some white oaks that were dropping, down, 40, 50 yards off the bottom of the creek. And there was, the best feed sign I've seen out here. It's nothing crazy, but it's a slight little point that dropped off. But on one side of this drainage, it was extremely steep. You have, on onyx, slope angle shading turned on, and it's, bright red, not quite purple, but bright red. And it's not bluffed, but when you looked over there, you're like, I don't know if I could physically climb up that because the ground's pretty soft, and it'd be pretty treacherous and just dangerous trying to get up that steep of a face. And one thing we realized after kind of going back in 3/4 miles to a mile back, when we circled back, we bumped probably 10+ deer, and they were all on the super steep side of the drainage. They weren't on the more terraced side that we were kind of slipping up on. Even though that's where all the white oaks are at. On that side, it looked like there was a lot more mountain oaks over there. And from all the deer that we kind of bumped, it seemed to be all does, at least the ones that we visually could see. They were so high up top, that they were like almost right at that crest, like right at the drop. And they could see all the way down to the bottom. I mean, if you were moving around a good bit, they could see all the way down to the bottom. But on our side of that ditch, that creek that we were walking up, was a lot thicker. A lot more understory compared to what was over there, but mostly due because it wasn't nearly as steep as the other side of the creek. Found some bear sign, though. Got in a little spot that had some quite a bit of hickories down in a bowl, down in a small hub. And there were some broken branches from those hickory trees that they were climbing up and snapping them off fresh.
Was it like real fresh?
Yeah.
Like you go in there and kill them?
Like the leaves are green still on the broken branch that was laying on the ground. And there's multiple of them just laying there. And it's the same kind of broken branches I've seen in Arkansas, where it's like they break them. Sometimes they'll break it, and it's like, at least what I've seen in the past, they're kind of like a jagged break. But like those smaller branches, the ones that they get out on the ends of one of those branches, especially like maybe a smaller bear, and they can snap it. It's almost like a clean break, and it'll just be like laying there, and all the nuts are stripped off. And like you see the leaves are all tore up and stuff, and we filmed some of it today too. Seth did. So I was like, okay. I'm like, it's a little hub that had just a ton. It was all hickories. There was no white oaks in that little spot, which was kind of interesting. But the trails here are insane. Now, some of them are bear trails. And Shane, you saw some of that today. I've seen it before in Arkansas, where it's like in some spots, and like Shane, you can talk about this in a second, about like where you find those like trails that are being used where they're kind of the bears are stepping like individual stepping spots. Like it's not like just like a worn out deer trail. It's like there's a place for the paw to go here, there's a place for the go to paw there, and it's like there's like these worn down little spots where their paws go, but there's more like undisturbed ground in between them. Or we were finding some, and it looks like, because of how a bear's paw is when it's walking, anyone that's kind of hunted this kind of terrain or up in East Tennessee and North Carolina and stuff, with their paws, it literally mats the ground down to the point that you almost think it's a hiking trail, and they're wide. They're 12 to 18 inches wide, some of those trails. And sometimes the deer use it, but compared to a deer trail, like a deer trail, if you have a deer trail, the ground's very disturbed. Like you can see the indentions of the hoofs going through. You might not be able to see an individual track, but you can tell there's hoofs coming through here. Versus like a bear trail, it literally looks like you like just rolled it over like when it was like asphalt rollers, where it's just pressed in super smooth. And we found a bunch of that in there today, back in that spot. So, long story short, didn't find any specific whip rubs or anything like that, but found some old rubs from last year. Saw a bunch of does. Definitely a pretty interesting spot. Some of the does let us get pretty close to the point that almost unknocked an arrow, and try to make something happen.
Get some camp meat, baby.
Should have knocked an arrow, not unknocked the arrow. But yeah, wasn't quite that close. But again, just saw a bunch of deer. Like this place has a lot higher deer density than even I'd previously thought coming into it. Even though you've been up here, Shane, you've done some research on the place as well, and come to find out it's got really high deer numbers.
Yeah, it really does. And, I mean, you can just drive around and just to be able to see that many deer just from the road itself. That's a telling sign. And then, like I said, I didn't see as much once I got back in the woods that I'd want to normally see, but I did find a fresh rub. found a shed, a little bit of feeding sign, but in the areas where the pockets of white oaks that I were expecting to kind of be dropping or hoping to kind of be dropping, that were tucked away in the mountain laurel and the thicker canopy and understory, there just wasn't enough of that. And lots of mountain oaks, a lot of red oaks, a lot of sawtooth oak that were dropping, that were just not being touched at all. And that's pretty telling. And the only thing that, like you said, the only thing that was really touching that right now was what I saw was bare, so.
Yeah. One thing I want to hit on that I think is a pretty interesting little tidbit that we might have picked up on earlier today is I think we're all looking for the same thing. We're all looking for whip rubs. We're all looking for feed sign, fresh dropping, stuff like that. Just your typical early season, just deer sign. And we were wondering if the bucks are going to be out of velvet yet. Like this is the time. It's September 13th right now, so this is about the time they're really stripping it off. Shane, you ended up seeing a whole bunch of deer today,
yeah,
including several bucks.
Yeah,
you saw a bunch of deer, so I want you to talk about that. But also, an important note, I think, or an interesting note, is the bigger bucks that you were seeing were already shed, where a lot of those smaller bucks still had velvet on their antlers, which could play in. Like if you're finding rubs. If that holds true, that pattern holds true, it's probably a good deer. So can you talk about just what you saw today?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like I just opened up a can of deer right here around there. Right here where we're
going to make that into a T-shirt.
Yeah. But, yeah, I saw multiple, I would say more mature bucks. I'd say 3.5 year or older, 8 point, 9 point, 10 point, something like that. And the ones that did have a substantial rack had no velvet. They had already shed. And the younger bucks still were holding on to that velvet, which is exactly what I'm seeing. When I just left another piece of public that I pulled cards on last week and pulled a bunch of cameras on, same thing. All the mature bucks have shed velvet probably weeks ago, and weeks later the younger bucks are still holding on. So if you are finding rubs right now, you can pretty much bank that that's probably going to be a mature buck. The testosterone level is just going to be higher for him, and he's going to start rubbing earlier, lose that velvet earlier, and as soon as that velvet comes off, they're at it, and it just ramps up from there.
I want to talk a little bit about whip rubs. So we brought this up on the podcast quite a few times in the last few weeks, if not the last month or two. Maybe, Shane, can you talk about, like, what is your thoughts on what is a whip rub? At least that's the terminology that me and Andrew use. You might call it something different, but like that rub that a buck, the trees that a buck typically will rub as he's coming out of velvet. What does that mean for you, and typically what does that look like in like your area of the country, of your area of Alabama that you typically hunt in?
Well, they're normally like small, like the size of your thumb would be a large one. I found some last week that were I would say inch and a half, 2 inches in diameter, which are larger, and that tells me that that's probably a really mature buck. Because most of the time it's just something the size of your pinky, and they've just beat it to pieces, or they've, I look at them in two different ways. If in the area that I'm normally hunting in, you'll find a lot of early rubs on the wild. Gosh, I can't even think of the name of them now. It's a flowering plant that most people have in the garden, but they grow wild out in the woods a lot of times.
Oh, hydrangea?
Hydrangea, yeah. And you will find those, yeah.
I'm taken back. I'm like,
yeah,
that's not what I thought was going to be said. Okay.
Wild hydrangea. And they will tear them up early. And those are usually the ones that when you see them just beat up and banged up and broke off in September, if you find that, you found a pretty good buck, more than likely, or an older age class buck that's got a high testosterone level at that early stage. But most of the time, if you're finding just a single one, it's probably if you don't find like the shed velvet or something with it, more than likely he's just working it as he passes along. I don't really put a whole lot of stock into it. The only thing you can think, and this is what I told somebody else that asked me what they could get out of an early rub, is that at this point in time, a mature buck just isn't moving very far. If you find a rub right now, he's probably pretty close by. That's the way I look at it, at least. And that's been my, I guess, maybe what I've discovered is they just don't move this much. They're conserving energy more than anything. And if you find one really close to water, a water source, something like that, this time of year when it's really, really dry, you're probably pretty close to a buck. And that's why the one I found today, I pinned it. I know right where it's at. It was fresh. It was in 2 days. I don't think that buck is too far from that. I just don't know what size, what class buck that is.
Now, I want to talk about also if, like, these early season rubs or like what sometimes we call whip rubs, is the different damage you can see on some of these rubs. Because some of them you will find, it could be, again, the size of your pinky, and it's just kind of skinned up, okay? And then you have some that's maybe the size of your pinky or as big as your thumb, or maybe even a little bit bigger. Maybe not bigger than your thumb, but maybe the size of your thumb maybe, that it is rubbed, but then the top of it's snapped off and broken out. Like, sometimes they'll do it. It seems like they'll do it with, like, different, like, shrub bushes per se, and maybe not like an actual, like, sapling tree, but they'll, like, it seems like they twist their antlers up in it and they, like, rip the top of it off. Does anything like that weigh more heavily for you, as in, like, more valuable than another one, as in, like, that kind of damage that you could see specifically on some of those early season rubs?
Definitely the damage to the top. I mean, because you got to think, if he's already got that much testosterone that built up, that he's that excited or that amped up, then more than likely he's a higher caliber, age class buck in that prime, because you just don't find that very often. When you do, you need to really pay attention to it, because you just don't see it that much. More often than not, you're just finding the one that's just skin up, kind of like the one I did today. It's just he brushed over it 2 or 3 times just in passing. He was coming out of a little thermal hub. That was the only one in the area. If there'd have been something nearby that he'd have broke up, really tore up or something like that, that would have really got me excited, and I would have, that's something you can definitely, especially if it's near, if I could have found it where it was near feed, like just off a feed, and so he's hanging around that feeding area and he's getting really amped up. He's got that testosterone level, even though you can't breed right now. There's no does in heat. It's just that he's showing off dominance early, is the way I look at that. Is he's saying to everybody else, this is what I can do, That, so yeah, I definitely put a lot more weight in the one that's is beat up rather than one that's just kind of rubbed just for the heck of it. And that's the way I look at them.
I'm curious about as we kind of step into this hunt. It's Wednesday. We're hunting till Sunday, and so pretty short hunt. We got a couple days to get it done here, and we've been talking about what we all want to do in the morning, and I think everyone kind of agreed, like, hey, let's wake up, get some coffee and breakfast in us, and then let's hit the woods and start looking. Not necessarily diving in anywhere blind, trying to kill something in the morning. Like, let's hit the woods and scout our way into some stuff. So, Shane, can you? I'm curious about your mindset going into tomorrow, where Andrew 2 years ago, I would have been up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I would have been up on that mountain right there, way before daylight, just sitting on nothing, just like went up there
shaking hands with the timber rattlesnakes.
Yeah, I mean, just totally beating the bushes, like getting up the mountain, probably blowing out all the deer. So, like, I'm curious about what your mindset is, and I'm also really curious about, like, what do you need to see tomorrow that is going to get you, like, Friday I'm killing something here, or tomorrow afternoon I'm killing something here?
Yeah. Well, I used to be the same way. I mean, I would, and I'm still find myself doing it now. I get so excited that I just can't wait, and I end up burning myself out or overexerting myself, and really, even in a short period hunt. So let's say you're just a weekend warrior, and so you're putting together just stacking short-term hunts every weekend on top of each other. Unless you really have really good intel, you're better off spending one of those days scouting to find something really good and hunting that one day off of that really good sign, rather than trying to just throw a crap hunt out just for the heck of it. And then you've lost that day that you could gain intel, So right now I don't have anything here what I thought I might find looking at a topographical map doesn't compare to boots on the ground. So I've got to put boots on the ground basically to find what I'm looking for, which is just something fresh that I know is fresh. Feed sign, could be rubs. We see in deer, so if you're seeing deer, I want to go to where I'm seeing deer, and so we know where there's deer here. So now we just got to backtrack where they're coming from, because we know where they're at. We saw them this afternoon, just driving the roads. So now then we just got to backtrack that to where they are at a point in time that we can intercept them. So that's basically what I'm trying to do right now. I'm trying to take the intel that we saw deer, and tomorrow I'm going to go see if I can find out where those deer are coming from, so I can set up some sort of intercept. Either tomorrow afternoon or Friday, Saturday, Sunday, one of those days. And I may have to scout. I may have to scout all day tomorrow. I may not hunt at all tomorrow either. I may just scout in the morning, and I may just kind of slip hunt and still hunt tomorrow afternoon till I get into a spot that I feel. So it may take that. It may take me bouncing around 2 or 3 different places, till I find what I'm looking for. But I know there's deer here, so now we just got to figure out where can we intercept those deer at.
Yeah, I actually love what you just said about like the weekend warrior thing, because we've hit on that a whole bunch of times. We've talked about that where, because that's my situation 100% right now, is every weekend you're kind of starting over, because whatever you found on Saturday and Sunday, well, you just gave it 5 days off, and then you go back in there the following Saturday and it's different, and you're kind of starting over. And, sometimes that's not always the case. Sometimes you find something that's good for longer, but a lot of times you're just starting right back over, like square one, and you're kind of like, what I get in the rut of a lot of times is I'll find something one weekend, and then I'll go back the following weekend, and I burn my Saturday on that, and I'm like, okay, so there's no deer here anymore. Something has changed. They're not coming through. And I basically burn my Saturday, don't get any new intel, and then Sunday I'm trying to find something, and then you get in this kind of vicious cycle, and you end up wasting the rut or something. Worst case scenario. That's happened to me a lot over the years. So what you're saying, that's something that I've adopted a little bit over the years, when I have the discipline to do that, because that's kind of hard for me to do. But when I do it successfully, I almost always end up having success, and it's just kind of holding yourself to that standard and making yourself go out there and do that. Jacob, I'm curious about you too, by the way. So kind of the way this hunt's working, we got some guys helping us in camp this week, which I think you'll hear them on another podcast soon. But so we got camera guys that are helping. Shane, you're going to have one with you. Jacob, you're going to have one with you. And then I'm just going to kind of float around and just do something. But Jacob, what is your mindset for tomorrow? Kind of same question. I'm curious about what you want to look for. You're brand new to the place. This is your first bow hunt of the year or whatever. What do you need to see tomorrow to get you really fired up, other than a black bear?
Oh man, dude! If we go slipping through mid morning tomorrow, because I'm taking my bow when we're scouting. If we find a black bear feeding on oak flat or something, or hickory, then we are putting the stalk on.
2 weeks ago, I was on the phone with him. He's like, "I'd be fine if we didn't see a bear this whole trip. I don't care nothing about shooting a bear with a bow." I think he's scared of them. And now you got that confidence, baby. Let's go.
We're running a sever through something. But no, that would be so awesome. I told you. Did you? Your phone cut out. I think I lost you earlier. I told you to go buy me a black hoodie.
Oh yeah.
If I see a black bear on an oak, this is probably
you're gonna square them shoulders up and go walking through the woods.
Just start slip hunting in with a black hoodie.
You want me to get you a big Bowie knife too? Go after.
No, but no, that would be very exciting. God, I'd love that. But no, what I would feel more confident on is trying to find. First off, I still want to try to hopefully find a few trees. We found white oaks that were dropping today. That were we were sitting there and we were listening and seeing them drop. Okay, wasn't a ton, but they were dropping. I could find them on the ground and there was feeds on there. It just wasn't in a spot that I expect a buck to use. Too far in the bottom. It's too far away from potential bedding sites. I don't think they're bedding specifically in those tight bottoms right there. So it's not the right location. But I think if we can find a similar situation higher in elevation, potentially closer to some quality bedding areas, I think I'd feel very confident, even in the situation if there wasn't whip rubs close by, but there was heavy feed sign, and specifically if we could cut some kind of tracks, or if there was old licking branches or something in the general area, like on a little shelf or something, I would feel confident enough to throw a sit at it and do almost like an observation hunt for an afternoon and seeing if we can lay eyes on. Maybe he doesn't come to that specific tree or those specific trees close to us, but see if we can lay eyes or hear deer movement, maybe a little bit further off that we can then key in on for the following hunt or the following day and slip in there and scout that spot. So I would be, pretty excited about finding something like that in the area where there's, again, you're having that high traffic. But the problem is this whole place has high traffic. I mean, everywhere I've gone, which hasn't been a ton, but every place I've stepped foot on, I'm like 10 yards off the road. I'm like, this is a hell of a trail. And I'm like, there ain't that many hiking trails in this place. I guarantee it. And I'm like, no, this is all deer trails and bear trails. But ideally, it would be like my thought process is right here behind us. I want to go run up that, that ridge system.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm doing.
And check out a couple different spots where you have some of these very subtle drainages running up. That you kind of looked at some of that ridge line, but you didn't look at the whole thing. But I think you can find spots up there in and around some of the rock outcroppings where potentially, if you find one of those white oaks that's getting a lot of sunlight that potentially could start dropping a little bit early, you could find like an isolated little pocket of deer movement where they're like maybe there's a lot of deer down low coming down, but maybe that mature buck's maybe a little bit higher up on that isolated food source that he's hitting before he drops down after dark and feeding on other food sources down the bottoms. And that's kind of what I'm kind of looking for, because to be honest, with there being so many deer out here, I kind of want to get in a spot, this may sound crazy, where you don't have a whole bunch of eyes and ears and noses like potentially messing with you. Like if you could find that isolated buck where like you kind of get in the spot like, okay, there's a lack of sign, and all of a sudden you start getting into some of that fresh buck sign, potentially getting an opportunity that you're not going to be in a spot where you have 10 deer underneath you on a feed tree before that buck ever steps out.
Yeah.
And 10 does and some young bucks and stuff. So to me, that would be like an ideal situation, is kind of find that isolated little pocket with some subtle bucks on that's just getting touched up by a few deer, but it's not like every deer in the county is on that specific spot. Because like where I found today, like the feed sign I found today, you could tell like the deer been feeding there, but it's not been like a bunch of deer. It's probably just been a handful of deer there, and there was some punch hole tracks and stuff in the ground, but there was nothing there that told me like, again, a buck's going to be using this during the day. He might be there at 11 o'clock tonight, but more than likely he's going to be higher up on the ridge. And I still haven't checked that spot off completely without going back in there. The only problem is on that spot, some of these areas you can kind of come in. You can come in a couple different ways, up and down in elevation. Over there's only one way in and one way out.
Yeah.
And it's going to be pretty freaking rough to get to where I probably need to be to kind of find the sign I'm looking for.
Yeah. Sometimes in areas like this where you have that steep terrain where they're at, you're almost danged if you do, danged if you don't, because they're in a position that they're basically bomb-proof for your access. So a lot of times it's just, that you have to, you have to not put yourself in the mindset of that's where I've got to go. Because a lot of times that's just, leading you down a path that you're not going to see anything. You're going to blow them out. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. Especially when it's hot like this and you're trying to hike up side of a steep bluff or something like that. A lot of times, sometimes it's just not worth it, but that's just kind of the way early season hunting is a lot of times that you get suckered in by that,
Yeah, and see, like one thing I was hoping to find, and maybe we find this at some point in the hunt, is where you find those whip rubs, but some kind of whip rubs that's showing a point of travel or path of travel up and down in elevation, or even side hilling. Side hilling would be great too, but really up and down in elevation that you can kind of like backtrack up a little bit, even though the deer aren't traveling very far, trying to give you an idea of where that buck's going. Not like in your situation where there was just a single rub, but like where you can find, a few of them in that spot. And, I hit so many little sapling thickets today that just like, we're back home in Alabama, and if it was, at least where we're at, 2 weeks later from now, those little
covered up.
They'd be littered with rubs. Like there'd be bucks about all sizes.
It's rub city, baby.
Yeah, and like as high as the deer numbers are, I kept coming up to some of those little pockets, and I'm like, I would just be scanning like, bro, where's the rub at? And like, they're not. It's not there. It's not there. And you just kept leapfrogging. It's like not there. I'm like, man.
Yeah.
Which makes me think, because if we cover the bottom, there is a lot of deer in that spot. But I found some sign, like some bigger droppings and stuff like that, some fresher droppings, because like we were finding some smaller droppings, and then we found some of those that's like cut the that first joint of your pinky off on the ground that was fresh. And it was 2 piles, same size, about like 80 to 100 yards apart, and like this one little ridge point dropped off. And I looked up there, and it was gnarly where it came from, okay? But if I got up another 150, 200 feet in elevation and started side hilling, I would find some of that sign that we're talking about, some of those whip rubs and stuff like that, potentially higher up. Yeah. It's just you got to get there. And like Shane said, you can get up there, but depending on how open some of that terrain is, because one thing we've realized here, there's some pockets of this timber on this property it's extremely wide open. Extremely open timber. And there's other places like where I went this afternoon, it was complete opposite. I mean, you could have had a bear 25 or 30 yards from you in some of these spots, and like you couldn't see the freaking bear. He'd be 450 pounds. So it just, as you go up in elevation, if it starts getting more open where they're truly bedding with a visual advantage, it's going to be very hard to find the sign, I think, without him potentially seeing you from higher elevation, because like that's one thing that hurt us tonight is when we bumped some of these does is they were bedded on a very, very steep, not a bluff, but it's a crazy steep ridgeline, hillside, to the point that you're like, how's the earth still sitting there? Because it looks soft, but like if any rain comes, it should just fall down, okay? And they were like bedding where they could see way down into this bottom. I mean, way, way, way down says Bob, and they'd like hear you, see you, and all of a sudden you see a flicker of movement and a tail and a skint head, and they'd be going over the top. So, anyways, that's kind of just my thought process going into it. But one thing, Shane, I wanted to kind of get into this. Like Andrew kind of brought up the whole thermal hub thing. And my thing isn't necessarily with the 100% with the thermal hubs, but it's like with the thermal hubs and these micro drainages and stuff. One thing out here that we've noticed, and Seth, I think, saw this as well tonight, is how much thermals play advantage, specifically in the evenings in some of these areas. When you start getting on the backside of one of these really steep ridges, and it gets shaded there a lot earlier than you would be on like a sun-exposed ridge. Like we came around, we were working around this side of this, working up this creek drainage, side hilling, and it was just stagnant air, nothing was moving, and we got to right where one of these drainages, these bigger drainages, cut up the ridge from us. And right when we're coming around into that, where I can barely start seeing it, you can start feeling that airflow just start coming down, rushing right down that drainage. And it's complete opposite wind direction as what it was supposed to be today. But you could just tell with nothing else moving, that was the thermals dropping down. It was still probably an hour and 15 minutes before, dark. What is your take in like this kind of terrain? Because this is something that like, we're able to kind of experience this. I mean, this is probably the steepest stuff you've ever hunted in, right? Because you've never hunted with me in Arkansas or anything like that, right? I mean, outside of some parts of Alabama, but this is still steeper than some of that stuff, I'll be honest.
Yeah, it probably is.
But, I mean, Shane, like, what is your take on, like, the thermal switch aspect? Because we've kind of texted about this between, like, mornings, it's not just that daylight starts rising, okay? Yeah. Not in every situation. And the evenings is not just at last light it starts dropping. What is your take in like this kind of steep terrain and stuff in these micro drainages and thermal hubs, and how all that plays a part of everything?
Well, I mean, you can't go in with an idea of I'm going to hunt this because I believe that the thermals are going to be doing whatever they should be doing at that period of time. Like whatever you have in your mind, you can't go into an area with that opinion set in stone to hang here no matter what. You got to go into each area and test the thermals. Milkweed, whatever, wind floaters, whatever you're doing in each different area, because otherwise, if you just go into an area and say, well, it's facing the east, and the thermals should be dropping an hour and a half before that, before sunset, and you get in there and let's say that thermal drop has been doing that all day, and you've been working in this thermal hub for a couple hours working your way down in it. Well, you've basically eliminated everything that's below you already. So you really have to, it's about timing, and it's about getting in there and making sure that your thermals are doing what you think they're doing and not just what you assume they do. I think a lot of people make an assumption about thermals that at a certain period of time to kick on, at a certain period of time to kick off, and that's not really the case. You can be in an area that you would assume that the thermals are rising or falling, and it can be just the opposite, just depend on, temperature, cloud cover, wind direction, all these different things play a factor into it, and you can't just make an assumption ahead of time that it's going to be what it's going to be,
Or even on the assumption, not even like as technical as there's a certain time it's going to switch, but, I was growing up, I was taught this, that, you hunt high in the mornings and you hunt low in the evenings, okay? And it was never like because of thermals. It's just that's what you do. Yeah. It was never like, oh, it's because of thermals you do this. It's because my uncles never called it thermals. They just called air rises. Warm air rises in the morning, cool air falls in the evening, and all that kind of stuff. But it's not even that simple because we've done a video on this, Shane. We did a reel on this on Instagram and Facebook where we went to a state park in Alabama that's not necessarily. You can draw, anyways, it's quota hunt for that place. And we were scouting a north-facing slope, north-facing ridge system, real steep stuff, some big bluffs. And it was 10 o'clock when we were walking in there into the spot. And it was still a falling thermal, 0 wind. It was like light and variable conditions. This is really when this stuff kind of plays into factor we're talking about is light and variable conditions. When there's less wind speed than 2 to 3 miles an hour, typically you're going to start seeing more of a stronger thermal pull. And on that shaded side of that mountainside that we were walking on, that north-facing slope, it still had a falling thermal at 10:30 in the morning. And there were some comments on there like, that's not possible. It's supposed to rise in the morning. That's not how thermals work. Thermals rise in the morning and fall in the evening. There was quite a few comments on that. We had a bunch of messages. I had a recent message that came on that. That was from like a year ago, okay? So it's kind of interesting, and not to blame anybody, because some people, you just don't know this until you've actually gone out there and you hear other people talk about it, and you actually go out there and experience it, and you can kind of see for it yourself. But like in an area like this, when you start, or in any area that's very steep country with a lot of elevation gain, to me that's where you see this as more of a factor than say if you're hunting flatlands or very gentle rolling hills. Like very gentle rolling hills, maybe 60 foot of elevation gain and drop. When the sun gets up like 7 o'clock in the morning, 7:30 in the morning, especially like early season, you're probably going to have a rise in thermal if it's light and variable conditions, because the sun can heat up all that ground. There's no like shade because of a north-facing slope if it's very gentle rolling hills, but in stuff like this, it's just not the factor.
Yeah. You got way more shaded areas, especially, steeper terrain. It cuts that angle of the sun off, especially now because the sun is starting to get an even steeper angle. So as you go further into fall and winter, that angle is going to cut even more. So steeper terrain at that point in time, especially depending on what it, if it's, you're on the north side of a steep face, you're going to be, it's going to start even sooner, Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's definitely steeper terrain is gonna generate a quicker thermal drop. And it's going to prevent an earlier thermal rise as well. A lot of times it'll just completely negate it altogether. Like a lot of the areas that I've hunted in, the north-facing slopes, they're constantly. It didn't matter if they have no leaves on them.
There's no sun.
So they're constantly dropping a thermal. And it's the same thing. I did the same thing as you on another whole other different piece of property. Of public land, and did the same thing. 1:30 in the middle of the day, and I'm sitting in the sun, and I've got dropping thermals, and it had all to do with the pull of what was below me. It had nothing to do with my conditions. It's just that what was below me was so much cooler than where I was, that it pulled that air down, even though I had a wind that I could have raised my hand up and touched that was moving the opposite direction. I still had that thermal pull there because what was below me was 10 degrees to 12 degrees cooler than where I was sitting in that sun. And so it just sucked everything down to it. So a lot of it, like I said, it's just you have to experience that to really trust it, because like you said, a lot of people commented on that video and said, well, there's no way. But I was there, I know what it'll do. People, unless you've got like 10-mile-an-hour wind that's really just going to overpower the thermals altogether, something like that, when you've got a 10 degree to 12 degree temperature drop that's 20 feet under you, you're going to have that thermal pull that's way stronger than any light and variable winds can ever, counteract.
Well, it's like we saw this in another piece of public in Alabama where you had mountain laurel up against open hardwood timber, and in that open hardwood timber, and this is kind of like a eastern facing slope, the open hardwood timber, you'd be standing there and you could feel light variable condition day, very low wind speed, less than 2 mile an hour wind speed that day. You could feel that rising thermal when you were just on the just above the edge of that mountain laurel. Mountain laurel is real thick, 6-8 foot tall, real big mountain laurel, and the kind you can actually kind of walk underneath a little bit of that stuff, and you can feel that rising thermal right there. The second you get about 5 to 10 yards into that mountain laurel, it was the complete opposite, pulling straight down to the bottom to the little drainage down below you. Yeah. And it was like that all the way to the bottom until you went down the bottom, came up the other side, still pulling thermal until you got above the mountain laurel. And then because mountain laurel, for people that don't understand what mountain laurel is a very, very dense green kind of a shrub plant that, some places it may grow 3 or 4 feet tall, and other places it could get, 6-8 feet tall in some places. Rhododendron can be very similar as well. Rhododendron can get a lot bigger as well, and you find it in Appalachian Mountains. I'm sorry, guys. Second.
So that spot too, by the way, another factor in that particular spot, it wasn't just the mountain laurel, but the creek that was coming down in that drainage was groundwater. It was flowing right out of the side of the mountain. And it's a pretty big creek. Like, you know what creek it is. Yeah. And I can't name it. But that creek was coming down, and the water itself is like very cold.
So cold.
And this was in the summer. I mean, this is like this is in May. And yeah, I mean, it's like hot outside. But you stick your hand in that water, I mean, it is like cold.
Yeah.
And man, that thermal drop coming down that drainage was like, it was like a cold breeze, man.
It was like air conditioning. Yeah.
We got in there and we didn't want to leave. We're like, man, we just hang out down here for a while.
I'm like, I guarantee there's no cottonmouths in this stuff because it's too cold for them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, tread with confidence.
Yeah,
for sure.
But it's so fascinating. Like when you're able to go out there and experience some of this stuff, and this is one of the reasons why I like to kind of have these conversations on the podcast is, maybe this gives somebody a different perspective of where they hunt. And another thing is the leaf on conditions versus leaf off conditions of how quickly thermals can switch or not switch, or how much they can be delayed. Leaf on, and Shane, I'd love for you to talk about this. Like, what have you seen like with leaf on conditions, compared to leaf off conditions with, the thermal switching for a rising thermal or a falling thermal specifically?
Well, I mean, with when leaf on, a lot of times you can get into a position where you think you've got a rising thermal, and you may have a rising thermal, but you've also got a canopy above you. So you can be sitting in a rising thermal that's going up, and you put your milkweed out and it goes 8 feet over your head and then starts to drift. But at some point in time, you're going to probably have that thermal drop again, because it can't just rise into infinity, especially when you have a canopy. So a lot of times a leaf on will give you the impression when you have a rising thermal that you're safe, that your thermals are rising to above the canopy and flying way off. But 100 yards away from you can be an area of dense coniferous trees or something like that have damp, because what happens is, and this is what happens under the rhododendron and the mountain laurel, the ground underneath them stay moist. It captures all the moisture. Well, that cools the ground temperature. And so same thing with pines, like thick pine trees. If they close off that canopy enough, and they can keep the soil moisture in the ground in that area, they're going to pull thermals. So you can be sitting next to one of those, and you can have rising thermals, and that buck can be coming. You can be expecting him to come in the direction that where that area of thick cooled ground is, and your thermals can be dropping there. So what went up eventually came down right into his path. So that's one thing that you can get kind of suckered into with the leaf on condition, is thinking that, my thermals are rising here, and I got this canopy up here. It's always rising. So And the opposite true. You could also have it in reverse to where the canopy covers up. You have the dropping thermals, and your thermals drop to an area and they hit sunlight and they rise. So it's one of those things where you can't always assume that you have the same conditions throughout the entire forest, and that's the way a lot of people hunt.
Yep.
Is they think that the conditions that you're seeing where you're at are going to be the same 100 yards, 150 yards, 50 yards from you can be completely different. So y'all have done the different podcasts with, I think it was Aaron Denny that talked about the wind, the turbulence and stuff like that, how that really affects, from where you're at to the ridge next door to you can be completely different, but you don't know where your scent is going at that point in time. Same thing, leaf off conditions. A lot of people assume once you have leaf off that you're just going to have rising thermals everywhere. And like we said, north facing, south facing, east facing, west facing thermals, anywhere you can have shade. You can have a south facing drainage that has leaf off conditions on it, and you can still have dropping thermals in that area. It's not always there's not a time for them to kick in. Of course, you're going to get the rising thermals at the higher elevations once that sun hits, but a lot of people think it just kicks in just instantly. Like once the sun hits the ground and it starts warming up, you're getting rising thermals. But a lot of times it takes hours to get that ground, especially if you have a heavy frost. It takes a while to burn that frost off. That frost has to come off first before the ground will ever heat up because it's insulating the ground. So you have to burn that frost off, and then you have to heat the ground up again, a ground that has been basically insulated by the frost. So it's not just this time it's going to kick in, this time it's not. It's going to be here, it's going to be there. It's why we get busted. If you get busted by a deer and you don't know it, you're set up in a perfect condition. You're hunting and you're not considering thermals, and you never see that buck. More than likely, you're in a good position. He just busted you, and more than likely it had something to do with thermals, and you weren't aware of it.
Shane, let me ask you this. I want you to kind of explain this because I know the answer to this question, but some people may not. Talk about when it comes to thermals, like we're talking specifically like a rising thermal, how the earth, the soil, the ground actually has to warm in order for that rising thermal to actually happen. I mean, can you just kind of go into a little bit of that for us? Because you just mentioned it like with the frost and everything, but that's the situation specifically in areas like in like heavy canopy cover. The sunlight has to penetrate through the canopy, through the mid-story canopy, to the understory in order for it to heat up, in order for that rising thermal to start happening.
Yeah.
So it's like stages. So I mean, could you kind of maybe go in some details on that and just like the importance of like thinking about that, like the sunlight actually has to hit the ground in order for it to start having a rising thermal, or you could be 30 feet up a tree and maybe 30 feet up in the upper mid-story, canopy, you might have a rising thermal, but on the ground it's still falling.
Yeah. I mean, if you're up, let's say you had 40% leaf drop. You're halfway through leaf drop, and you're sitting 20 feet up in a tree. More than likely, where you're at, you may have, at let's say you're 2 hours into daylight, which is typically a good time that you start getting that frost burn off. Let's say it's you got out there and it's 30 degrees. You've had a heavy frost. You got 40% leaf drop, and you're 20 feet up in a tree. 2 hours into the hunt, at your level, you're probably getting a pretty good thermal rise. But down at ground level, it's not to that point yet. And the problem is to kick off that movement, that buck, to get that buck out of his bed or get him moving or something like that, you're going to have to get that thermal switch at his level. So you can be safe at your level and think, well, this is perfect conditions. Why am I not, why has he not got up yet? Why is he not moving? Why am I not seeing movement? That's why morning hunting off of thermals is really like one of those, you're on a knife edge, because it takes, I think that's why we see a lot of that 10 a.m. when it's really perfect temperatures, is because that's the time that you're getting that burn off of that frost, that temperature's heating up, that let's say he's sitting downwind or sitting on a scrape, and he's going to J-hook around that scrape. Well, why would he want to do it when he knows that the thermals haven't kicked in and haven't warmed that scrape up enough to get that scent up and moving? So I think that's a lot of the reason why we're seeing that mid-morning, 10:30, 11 o'clock, because that's about the time that you're starting to get that upper elevation. If you've got the cooler temperatures, if you had a frost or something like that, which is that's when we're hunting in. We're hunting in that November time period, and that's typically the weather you're going to see during that period of time. Is you're getting those good frost, you're getting that right around freezing temperature. Well, it's going to take about 10 o'clock before that upper, say 1/3, an elevation is going to warm up enough to get him moving. So I think early morning movement, what I see with my camera data and with just hunting is they're moving up, basically chasing the falling thermals so you can catch them then. But I think that 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, mid-morning time is when they're switching movements from, say, a bed to another bed, and they're doing in that period of time that's when you've got that thermal, basically that rising thermal is starting to kick in. That's my opinion of why that's happening. It's not always the case, but I think that's got a lot to do with it.
On a practical level, let's again use this hunt that we're on right now as the example. When you're going in, like people might hear us talk about this, and we're like, oh, if you climb this high, the thermal's doing this, and then the temperature of the creek, and then the dirt over there, it's very complicated. So how does that factor in on a practical level when you're out? Let's say it's Friday. Let's say you go out tomorrow, you find a spot that you want to hunt that you're going to hit on Friday. From a thermal standpoint, what are you looking at? What are all the things that you're trying to consider when you're looking around and you're trying to figure out, okay, here's some good deer sign. Which tree am I going to get in? What times am I going to hunt this? Like, how is the weather going to affect it? Like, what is your thought process to actually apply this?
Well, gosh, that's a loaded question right there. Because it goes into a lot of different things. I mean, like let's take the thermal hub I walked in today. I mean, I plan on going back in there. The sign that I saw in there is enough to make me kind of like you. It's kind of an area like you were talking about. I think it's got a buck in it, and he's probably one or two deer with him. So I think it's exactly sets up just like you said. As far as when I think if he's in there, he's killable, is gonna depend on, and basically I'm trying to read minimal sign. But I'm also trying to figure out exactly what the thermals could be doing to get him up and moving, So I'm looking at the terrain, what side I can access, because if you have the wrong thermal and your access doesn't factor into that, then you can't really, let's say you're trying to access a east-facing thermal, and you know that your only chance to hunt that is in the afternoon, but your access is from the west. You can't do it. I mean, that's basically, when you're looking at thermals and you're looking at timing them out, is about, can I hunt this thermal when it's at its most huntable position, and can I access it in the right way? I think is that kind of answering your question, what you're kind of looking for? Because if you're trying to hunt a west-facing thermals, what I look at them as really good morning thermals, because most deer are trying to work with that falling thermal. That west-facing thermal hub is going to have falling thermals later in the morning so that buck can access those later in the day. That's why those, to me, have produced the best rut sign. But if you can't access that, if you can only access that west-facing thermal hub from the west, you're basically chasing the buck or chasing the deer the direction he's going. So when I'm looking at thermals and I'm looking at the conditions that I can hunt them in, it's all about can I get into position to take advantage of it, basically. So if I know the thermals are dropping in this west-facing thermal, but I can only access it from the west, then I'm going to eliminate that one.
Now, to clarify for the listeners real quick, when you say west-facing thermal, you're talking a west-facing slope, west-facing thermal hub, or just a area that the thermals, because of, say, like a rising thermal coming from the east in the morning, you're going to have that dropping thermal on that western side?
Basically, when I say west-facing thermal, the opening or the dump-out point, the end point, the head is the beginning of the thermal hub, is like up in elevation. Mm-hmm. So it's flowing to the west, southwest, northwest. It's got a western component to it. Those are probably in the morning are going to be shaded. Mm-hmm. So west facing, if it's facing northwest, southwest, or west, it's not going to get that sun early in the morning. So that's why west facing thermal hubs, from my camera data, produce almost 10 times as much daylight activity when it's huntable as any other. So morning time, west-facing thermal hubs. East-facing, if you're looking at afternoon hunting. So what I'm saying is if you can't access them from the direction that you need to be able to access an east-facing thermal hub from the east, because thermals are coming to you, you're going into them.
Yeah. And when you're talking about just for to help listeners kind of get a better picture of what we're talking about here, like a west-facing thermal hub, that lowest point of that thermal hub where all those ranges are coming together is facing somewhere to the west-southwest, west, northwest. That's got the low point, that creek drainage, whatever that is right there. East-facing, thermal hub. All those finger points are, to the west. They're dropping down to the east to the lowest point, and that's the spot that a buck can go through and check out, and he can scent everything up above him, higher up in that thermal hub.
Yeah. Yeah, basically, you're looking at those as they're used completely opposite. One is used for upward movement, and one is used for downward movement or cross movement. South-facing thermal hubs, pretty much are used up and down. What I see, they're not used much in the bottom, and those, of course, you have to. If you've got a south, I know y'all have seen my stuff. If you're dealing with a south-facing thermal hub, they're really, really tricky to get in and out of, because you really have to be on point with. You have to know going in, or have a good idea where that buck is within that south-facing thermal hub. And the same thing with the west and east and north. They're all the same, but access is key. You can't access a west-facing thermal hub from the west because you're basically chasing the deer up. Same thing from the east. You can't access an east-facing thermal hub from the west either. So you're basically bumping the deer down the thermal hub more than likely.
Now, also, I've got a question for you, because I've talked I've been on Bo's podcast. I know you had a 2-part episode on Bo's podcast, East Meets West, about thermal hubs, and it was really good episodes. But one thing that I've always, because Bo asked me about thermal hubs, and I told him Andrew growing up, he was talking about early in the podcast. We always used to call those bowls. Andrew, always used to be called bowls. You know what a thermal hub was, where you have all these drainages, all these little ridge points dropping out to one specific spot. And typically it's an area you have a lot of swirling winds in those, especially if it's a tight thermal hub. What is the conditions you need for you to feel like, say you have a buck pattern that's using one of those thermal hubs, whether it's west facing or east facing specifically. What conditions do you need, taking out, the buck's daylighting, he's showing up on camera, what kind of wind conditions, wind speeds do you need, or lack of wind speeds do you need to be able to hunt that? And how far down into the bottom are you going versus, one of the major ridge points dropping down into it?
Yeah. It depends on the direction, of course, they are. If it's a west-facing one and I'm hunting it in the morning, you're not going to get down in that thermal hub. You're not going to get anywhere near the bottom. You're going to hunt one of those secondary points. That's the way I look at it, because once you drop to a certain point, and it's all about timing too. But you got to think about it like this: if that buck is lower than you, and you're above him, and you got drop-in thermals till midday in a west-facing thermal hub. A lot of times it's midday before they switch. What would make you want to get down in that thermal hub, knowing that he's coming the way to you and your scent is going to him? So it just doesn't make sense. So west, they're really good for morning hunts, but you have to have a higher wind speed and you have to stay higher up in the elevation. You can't get down in the bottom of that. So I want something 7, 8, 9 mile an hour, and I want to stay in the upper 1/3 because that's where he's wanting to get to. He's wanting to get to that upper 1/3. Why do you want to get down in the lower 1/3 with him? That makes no sense. So I'm going to stay up where he's wanting to go, which he's wanting to go in that upper 1/3. And I'm going to do it with a 7 or 8, 9, 10, 12. Higher the better, usually, in those areas. So anything, I'm not going to do anything under a 5 mile an hour wind, because it's more than likely if you get down to that where that 1/3 breaks off into that 2/3, your scent is going to the bottom, and there's no way to counteract it. Now for an east, I don't want any wind. I want it as stagnant as it can possibly get. What I've seen with my camera data is those east-facing thermal hubs, once you get wind into them, you're going to have swirling. You're going to have just awful. You're going to, unless you have an east wind, and an east wind just kind of closes most all movement down a lot. So you don't really want that. But if you got anything else in an east-facing thermal hub, you're going to have some issues. You can get down in the bottom of an east-facing thermal hub, but you got to have no wind, because that's the only thing that really. You got to think about it like this: if he's up in that thermal hub and all the winds are swirling around him, why does he want to get down in the bottom? He don't need to. He's getting everything right there. But if that wind's not moving and he's trying to get everything in that thermal hub, he's got to get down in the bottom of it. So, no wind for an east-facing thermal hub, and I'm not going to get up in the thermal hub. I'm going to get to a point where I think he's crossing. Like you can't push all the way up into it. You can't push up into any thermal hub. Like, I know that thermal hubs are really popular topic. Of course, it's like I think there'll be 35 people in every thermal hub
on this place. Yeah. Paul, I go back to Paul's messages in our group where he's like, "Dude, I'm not even gonna hunt thermal hubs this year."
No.
He's like, every podcast is talking about thermal hubs. So
yeah,
and it's one of those things. We just dropped an episode a few weeks ago. By the time this episode came out, it's a repeat episode with Josh Driver. Original episode's episode 141. The new episode's 512.
512.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he was the first guy I ever heard use the term thermal hub, high crow's foot, social hubs, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Because, again, growing up, we always heard bowls. And that was like 2019 when we heard him really talk about that. And it kind of changed our perspective a little bit, because it always seems like they're awesome spots to run trail cameras in. But it's like I've always had terrible luck actually hunting them. Like when Bo asked me, what's your thoughts on thermal hubs? I'm like, I don't want to touch a thermal hub. I just don't feel confident in it. Yeah. Now, after having a lot more confidence in like understanding the actual thermal aspect of it and how much that plays a factor for it, I feel more confident. But 2 years ago, no way. Like I just every time I'd go in one of those spots, you get deer blowing at you from every direction, because more than likely you're hunting one of these thermal hubs that sets up for really bad swirling winds, especially with a rising or falling thermal.
Yeah.
And it's like any deer in that general area is catching that swirling wind, so that deer might be 300 yards from you, which he thinks upwind, but that wind's kicking down and shooting right back up that drainage, going right to him.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's timing and wind direction. Like you can hunt them, but it's only specific times that you can do it. And I'm not really hunting them. I hang a lot of cameras in them because, dang, they work. Like you want to get deer on camera, find you a thermal hub. Like that's especially a mature buck, and but they're not all created the same. They got to have thick cover, or they got to be really steep. Like you can't go out and find a thermal hub that has no cover in it and is just kind of open. Like
And not steep.
It's not steep. Yeah, I mean, you may have small bucks, you may have does and stuff like that using it, but you're not going to have the really mature buck using it. But hunting them, again, it's wind conditions, it's snowing the condition. A lot of times you can't hunt like a west-facing thermal one. I mean, a lot of times it does take to that midday. That's what I like to do. Like last year, the buck I shot or missed, don't know what I did.
Yeah.
It was 1 o'clock before I could get in there to hunt him, because that's when the thermal shifted, and it was a west-facing thermal hub, and he did exactly what I thought he was going to do.
Let's talk about that, because you didn't talk about that last time we had.
I don't think we talked about it on the podcast.
Yes.
Did we?
No,
so.
absolutely not, because we haven't had him on since that happened. Other than that time you had him on in the springtime, or
Yep.
in
Yeah.
whatever that was. So Shane, walk us through that hunt, at least on like what was the camera pattern, like what was the pattern you were getting on this deer of how this buck was used, because he was a really big buck.
Yeah.
Potentially still is a really big buck.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Have you got him on camera?
I haven't seen him on camera.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that he expired. And I just never found him.
When you take the squirrel dogs in there, go find him.
Yeah.
But so look, talk a little bit about what was the thing. What led up to you wanting to go sit that spot? How did you set that spot? How did you pick the ridge points or like the secondary ridges that you were kind of set up on? And what were you planning on potentially hoping he was going to do based off what you were seeing? And how did it kind of end up?
Well, I mean, he was using a west-facing thermal hub in the morning. I had him basically running the bottom of that west-facing. It was actually a group of west-facing thermal hubs. There was like 3 together. And he was traversing the bottom of them and just kind of working his way across each one of them. And he was in there, 10 days, he was in there 4 days in daylight. So he was consistently in that area and had been there for several weeks. Mm-hmm. He was, and it really didn't matter about wind. Wind didn't factor anything in really. I went in hunting it with a bad wind because I figured I had to give him the best advantage I could give. I had to give him the best wind for him. And like I said, he was running the bottom of those thermal hubs, and he would occasionally go up through one of them, and he would work over to the next one, and he'd work over the next one, and he'd work his way back down. By the end of the day, he's coming out on the opposite side of this big ridge system, dropping down into an east-facing thermal hub. But he wasn't huntable on the east-facing thermal hub. It was just way too thick. Access was not. I couldn't have accessed him from that direction. So my only option was to hunt him off that west-facing thermal hub. And that day, I wanted to go in there and hunt him. It was cloudy. We had a wind. We had a kind of a frontal boundary that came through and reversed, so it backed up into a warm front. And it turned cloudy, it warmed up during the day. The winds really, really kicked up. The wind started coming out of the southwest, and he was working his way into that, crossing into that wind. And basically, I was coming in from the west, and I got him right where I thought he would be at that period of time. He was with a smaller buck, using him as kind of a decoy, and I just didn't put it together. I flubbed. I don't know what I did, but he was using, just like I normally have seen him do, those if you can get multiple west-facing thermal hubs that kind of work into one area, those are really light up during the rut, because they're just, it's just the conditions are just perfect for them to be able to use those multiple thermal hubs together, as long as they, are kind of similar in shape, have the same terrain, habitat, things like that. So
now, how did you pick your spot? Because you were saying that, it seemed based on trail camera data, he was running that lower part of those hubs. How did you pick where you wanted to hang your stand or climb a tree or whatever in order to get a shot? Like, how high up were you in, on one of those points?
I was ground hunting. Yeah, I was just kind of slipping through. There's another small ridge that kind of runs a parallel with him. Like these ridges run. He was basically in a big ditch. This area had a ditch that ran the base of those thermal hubs, and it was 8-foot deep ditch. And that's another issue, like ditches. If you can get ditches anywhere, but if you can get ditches around thermal hubs, those are going to be focal points. Those ditches are just natural thermal draws anyway. So he was utilizing 3 things when he was in there. He had the thermals, which it turned cloudy, temperatures changed, thermals were no longer an issue, but he was utilizing the thermals that were in that ditch. That's what got him into that area, and that's why I went in there. I was like, I guarantee you, he didn't have the wind he wanted. I gave him the wind. I gave him a wind that was disadvantageous for me because I'm coming in from the west. I'm almost coming with, like we were like 2 ships passing in the night. He's coming directly toward me, and my wind is going just off of him, and he's working his way into it. But he was utilizing that ditch, the thermals that were pulling down that ditch. He was working some scrapes, and basically, I just thought that morning. I thought, well, I wanted to go in there and hunt that morning because the conditions were perfect for what I wanted, but they weren't perfect for what he wanted. And so I didn't go in there and hunt that morning. But as soon as I got that frontal shift moved and the wind switched, temperatures came up a little bit, got cloudy. Then I knew at that point in time that his only option at that point in time would be to move along with that ditch, because that ditch was the only thing that was going to be drawing any thermals at that position, and he had 5 or 6 scrapes right along the side of that ditch. And so that's basically, that was basically my game plan. It worked. It just didn't work out 100%. It worked out 50%. So
that's the deer you ended up shooting, and how did that go down? I mean, like that's kind of a crazy story how he ended up going down, and then I guess it got back up.
He got up, yeah. I mean, I walked up on him. I saw horn. I got in position, got braced. I had time to do everything. I did everything perfectly. He was standing 60 yards away.
What was he doing? Was he just working?
He was working a scrape.
Okay.
Yeah, he was working a scrape. Yeah, he had about 6 scrapes stretched out along this old logging road that was just completely, like, if you walked in there, you couldn't. You'd have to crawl through it. Like, it was just brutal. But he had a network of his trail that went through this old logging road, and he was working a scrape, and he just came off of it and came in this little opening, and I laid the hammer down, and it just didn't do the trick. Again, he went down. I mean, I was like, I'm going to go get this deer. I've had this deer on camera for 3 years now. I'm about to go over here and pull him out of the tree. Pull him out of the woods, and I got over there, and there was nothing.
Yeah. Like no hair,
no little bit of hair, no blood.
You didn't see him get up?
I never saw him get up.
Oh,
no.
yeah. Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, I'm looking through the scope and watch him for a good 15 seconds, and he's laying flat prone on the ground like this. Like legs out, The only thing I can think is just the angle of the shot. Just I don't.
Kind of shocked him.
Yeah, shocked him. Yeah.
God.
Hit high.
Yeah.
And
because I'm up on a ridge and he's on the other side and he's going up it. Well, I take that back. I was up on a ridge that is straight up, like it's like a knife blade, and it's just it's one of those ridges that's just, when you see them, you're like, that just sticks out in your, because I mean, it's literally as wide as this couch. That's what I'm walking on, and it is straight down on both sides. 60 or 70 feet. So, and and he's down below me and walking up a bank, basically. So he's like that, and it was just shot placement. I don't know. Just one of those. It's just, it wasn't broadside. It wasn't the most ideal position, but I've killed deer that away before, and I felt confident making that shot. But evidently, I just didn't make that shot. It's just one of those things that just happens to some of us sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you told us that story, and that story was a little bit too fresh in Jacob's mind.
Yeah, apparently it come back to bite both of us.
Yeah.
People can go back and listen to that episode if they want.
Yeah.
From last December.
Absolutely.
Jacob made a boo boo.
Yeah.
He made a mistake.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
It happens.
But one thing that's interesting about like the thermal hubs is like your thought process of having that wind. Like one thing I've realized, and hearing you talk about this, especially in this episode, is you're giving that buck every advantage possible with the wind and thermal, mostly the thermal specifically, but also kind of a wind in his face as he's working up that thing, and you are just far enough off the edge that you're able to get a shot. Now, specifically, most of this, at least the opportunities had here are during gun season. But can this ever play out at all during like archery season, or do you see them kind of using these terrain features a little bit differently, kind of earlier on, like in say October, early November?
No, it's the same thing. Like the year before, I had almost in the same position. I was probably 200 yards further away from where this happened. Same buck during archery season, doing the same thing. And he was utilizing it's just in archery season your range is cut, like it literally he walked up that day to within 15 yards of me, but it was just and that's the thing about it. A lot of times in way I hunt, and I think it's the way a lot of archery hunters hunt is you're hunting in this was early season too. The conditions are not right. You can't see 20, 30 yards. Like this one here, I had to get him at 12 yards. At 12 yards, I could have shot him. At 15, where he busted me, I couldn't shoot him. And a lot of times it's just that away. But yeah, I had that same deer the year before, same wind condition. I had to go in there and hunt him because I knew he was using this bed at a particular time, and I just timed it up just right. I mean, camera data had told me that he was using it kind of off and on, and I went in there and hunted it that morning with that same thermal and wind condition, southwest wind, dropping thermal. It was going right to him, but my wind was just dripping off the other side of the ridge, but it just was making it to right where he was at. So it was just a knife blade. It was just that close. So I had him back-to-back years, giving him the same wind and the same thermal advantage, but I didn't close the deal either one, so.
Now, didn't you have a couple other encounters last year during bow season with some pretty good deer?
I did, yeah.
What was the situation? Because one of them, if I remember right, you had like multiple encounters with, where he was bedding at, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I was in his bedding area multiple times, and same thing. You're hunting thermals. That's where the thermals and the hunting because early season, a lot of times these mature bucks are wanting to bed down low because, and this is what I've seen. And it played out with that buck, the big buck last year. It played out with the one that I almost is where they're most safe at is not up on the higher ridges. It's down low because, especially when those thermals are dropping, they feel comfortable moving in those areas. A lot of times you just got to hunt them in those areas because that may be your only option. And so it's danged if you do, danged if you don't. If you don't hunt them down there, then you'll never see them down there. But at the same time, if you hunt them down there, a lot of times they're going to bust you. So it's just a chance you got to take. And this deer ended up getting killed during the rut. But I had 5 run-ins with him in this same bedding area. And that's another thing is a lot of times a lot of people think that mature bucks are just bed wherever in the mountains, and for a majority of them will. They'll just, if they're just making their rounds, they'll bed. But once they get in 4.5, 5.5 years old, it's just like we are as old people. I like my bed, you know. I know where my bedroom is. I want to get there.
We all brought our own pillows.
We all brought our own pillows
or
blanket, fans, you name it.
Yeah.
We want all and they're the same way. So yeah, for a 3.5-year-old, probably he's bedding wherever. But for a 4.5, 5.5, especially 5.5, 6.5, even in the mountains where you think, well, he just bed wherever. No, he's probably got like 3 that he really likes. Now he'll go bed somewhere for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But when push comes to shove, he's gonna find that bed that he really likes because he trusts it, and that's what I was trying to kill this deer, in that bed that he trusts. And you know, I didn't get it done, but I saw him there 5 times. You know, he never busted me there 5 times, but I saw him there 5 times. So that's all you can ask for, you know,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're bow hunting a mature buck, you know.
What was his bedding area like, by the way? Like, how was he using that area? What was the area like topography-wise and cover and all that?
It was he was at the head, or I'd say, well, he was at the lowest, one of the lower points of a huge thermal hub. So this wasn't a small thermal hub. It was a really, really big one. And it was super thick. Now, I don't believe he was using this thermal hub once leaf drop, but prior to leaf drop, he was in there consistently. Like, he was in there every other day. He was using that one little 4 or 5 acre bedding area. But he was accessing it from the same direction every time. The only problem with it, I knew where he was coming from. The problem was you couldn't access it. That's another thing. Like, you just access. Like, he was consistently using this one he loved that access point because he always did the thermals. There's no way he was bomb proof to get into it. But he left himself open to an area that only I could access from because my property joined that. So I had the only available access to this public land, basically, and that's the only way I could have ever hunted him. Anybody else could have hunted him from the highway or from another road that accessed, and he would have known well before that, you know. But it was super thick, blow down, you know, an area you would have to crawl through, you know. It's basically what he was bedding in, you know.
Interesting. It's like a thermal hub you hunted last year. They, you know, down, you know, on a gun hunt specifically, you kind of walked in there, a lot of blow down. You're like, man, it's too thick. Ain't nothing in here.
Yeah. Well, I ended up meeting the guy that killed the buck in there.
Well, this one here got killed too. So
yeah. Me and that guy were all over each other. I was looking at his boot tracks. I'm like, oh, this guy's going back here. I'm gonna slip in the backside, and I'm gonna get this deer coming through this hub. He killed it.
Yeah.
I thought too hard about the whole situation. But to kind of bring this full circle, Shane, in the area that you're talking about right now with this particular buck, is correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a lower deer density than where we're at now, right?
Much lower.
So how do you come to a place like this and view it kind of through the correct lens? Because if you're used to that lower deer density and you come to a place like this that has a much higher deer density, it's just like, how do you not see this sign and your eyeballs just like pop out of your head, you know? How do you kind of temper that excitement and be like, okay, this good sign for where I'm at?
Yeah. I mean, that's, you know, that's why I'm really rethinking my thermal hub over here now, you know. And that's why I want to go back to it, because it has similar sign to what I'm used to hunting. Whereas probably if I go over here, like you said, more deer, more opportunity to get busted. You know, it's a lot, you know, it's probably a catch 22 because higher deer density, higher opportunity, lower deer density, lower opportunity, but it's also lower deer density, less opportunity to get busted. So it you know, as far as sign goes, it's all the same sign. It's just the quantity of it, you know. So you're looking for the same amount of sign, the same type of sign. It's just you're probably going to see a lot more of it. It's going to be more eye-popping. But if it's not there, it's not there, But a lot of times you can't. A lot of times it's a sign you don't see that gets you where you need to be. And I'm not saying that like it's a sign that you aren't looking for, or you don't pay attention to, or you don't put value in, that in the end comes back to bite you is usually my case when I don't succeed at stuff that I found afterwards that really kind of I should have seen that to begin with and paid more attention to it, and I guess that's the as far as deer density and things like that, it's all the same sign. It's just the quantity of it and not reading too much into that massive amount of sign, because a lot of times that's just it's just fluff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're just now getting into this hunt. I want to do another podcast towards the end of the hunt, kind of recapping how all this actually ends up playing out, so people will be tuned in for that. But you already got yourself a little souvenir there.
I was going to bring that up.
I did. I got a shed today.
Yeah, man.
A shed that still has old stuff from last year. So
yeah, it's still got.
Yeah,
like
so he had just rubbed.
Yeah, he had just rubbed before he lost it, I guess, because it looks like he's rubbing a cedar or something. It's kind of orange in there.
Yeah.
But how often do you find a shed that's got this like tree bark still?
I can't ever remember finding one.
Is
it?
Yeah. Is it because of where he?
I think where he dropped it. Yeah, because he was under a rock. Like it was a rock outcropping, and this was tucked in there. I think he bedded in there, and it just fell off.
That's so cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
man.
when you originally,
we're hunting these cave deer, bro.
Yeah, Shane. When you originally came in, and you're like, "Hey man, I found a shed today. It was under a rock." I'm like, under like a rock, like it was like a rock was laying on top of it, and then you're like, "No, like an overhang." I'm like, "Oh, okay, that makes way more sense."
Those apparently they like overhanging rocks to bed in, because that's where he probably lost this one at. So
yeah, people on the video podcast can see that shed. If you're not watching the video podcast, it is available on YouTube, so I suggest you go watch it. Jacob, you got anything else before we kick it off and go to sleep here, because we're creeping up on midnight.
Yep. No, I'm excited for the rest of this hunt. Try to see what we can get into. Scout hard tomorrow. Do a little slips hunting / scouting, especially tomorrow afternoon, and see what we can wander into. Again, we're in a very target-rich environment, depending on what your targets are. But hopefully we're going to have some opportunities later into this hunt after we kind of get a better lay of the land and what some of this quality sign looks like, and hopefully we kind of get into a little bit more of them whip rubs. That's what I'm looking for tomorrow. That or a bunch of bear crap. One of the two, man. You give me one of the two, I'm going to be thrilled.
This might turn into a bear hunt real quick.
Yep, absolutely. So, other than that, appreciate you, Shane, for coming down and doing this hunt with us, man. This is going to be fun and kind of spend time in camp and, hopefully make something happen. But, Andrew, you got anything else?
No, let's go to bed.
Okay, awesome, guys. Well, appreciate y'all watching this podcast on YouTube. Appreciate y'all listening to this podcast, guys. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure you go leave us a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. Also, share the podcast with some buddies, guys. Season is upon us, at least for most of us. Some of us that may be open a little bit later in October. It's creeping up on us very, very quickly, so make sure you share the podcast with some friends and family members. But, guys, thank y'all for watching. Thank y'all for listening. We'll catch y'all back here on the next episode from the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast. Y'all stay Southern.